You know how some stories begin with a dramatic moment, a car crash, a letter arriving, a phone call that changes everything? Mine started with a package, not even my package, just a cardboard box with my name on it, delivered to the wrong hands, carried through my door by a woman covered in chalk dust and wearing a smile that could light up the entire Colorado sky. I should probably start at the beginning, though. My name is Chelsea, and 6 months ago, I thought I had my life figured out. I owned a small massage therapy studio in Boulder, had a routine that kept me grounded, and believed that predictability was just another word for happiness. I was the kind of person who meal prepped on Sundays, never missed a dentist appointment, and thought adventure was trying a new yoga class. Safe, comfortable, utterly, completely safe. That Tuesday afternoon, in early spring, I was reorganizing my essential oils for the third time that week when the door chimes sang their familiar welcome. I looked up expecting Mrs. Henderson for her usual deep tissue appointment, but instead found myself staring at someone who looked like she'd just descended from Mount Olympus. If the gods were into rock climbing and had a thing for making my heart stop mid-beat, she was tall, maybe 5'8", with sun-streaked hair pulled back in a messy bun that somehow looked perfectly intentional. Her arms were lean and strong, marked with the kind of tan lines that come from spending entire days outdoors. But it was her eyes that caught me, green like the color of pine needles after rain, bright with mischief and something deeper I couldn't quite name. "Upsky said this belongs to you," she said, holding up a box that was clearly marked with my studio's address. Her voice had this rough edge to it, like whiskey mixed with honey. Figured I'd play delivery girl. She was grinning, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, and I noticed the way her muscles moved under her tank top. I'd been a massage therapist for 5 years. I knew bodies, understood the language of muscle and bone, but looking at her felt different, like I was seeing the human form for the first time. "You didn't have to do that," I managed, stepping forward to take the package. Our fingers brushed as I reached for it, and I swear I felt an actual spark. Not metaphorically, I mean an honest-to-God electric shock that shot up my arm and lodged somewhere behind my ribs. She must have felt it too, because her grin widened and she tilted her head like she was studying me. "Addison," she said, extending her hand properly. "I climb at the gym next door. Seen you around. Chelsea." Her palm was warm and calloused, the grip firm and confident. I found myself holding on a beat too long before forcing myself to let go. Use single quotes, bleeding. I was staring at a scrape across her left palm, probably from whatever cliff face she'd been conquering that morning. Without thinking, I was already reaching for my first aid kit, the one I kept stocked for the occasional client who pushed too hard during a session. "It's nothing," she protested, but she didn't pull away when I took her hand again, turning it palm up to examine the wound. Occupational hazard. The scrape wasn't deep, but it was long and filled with dirt and tiny pieces of rock. I cleaned it gently with an alcohol wipe, hyper-aware of every small intake of breath, every subtle shift in her posture. Her skin was soft despite the calluses, and I could feel her pulse under my thumb quick, like a bird's wings. "There," I said, smoothing the bandage over her palm. "Try to keep it clean." "You're good at that," she said softly, and when I looked up, she was watching me with an intensity that made my cheeks burn, the gentle touch thing. "Bet you're amazing at what you do." I should have said thank you. Should have stepped back, created some professional distance. Instead, I heard myself saying, "You should try a session sometime. Climbing probably leaves you pretty knotted up." The words were out before I could stop them, and they hung in the air between us like a challenge. Addison's eyebrows lifted, and that grin returned, slow and knowing. "Yeah," she said, leaning slightly closer. "What would you recommend for someone Who spends too much time hanging off rock faces? My mouth went dry. Deep tissue work. Focus on the shoulders and forearms. Maybe some trigger point therapy for I caught myself before I could ramble further about muscle groups. I mean, if you're interested, very interested, she said, and something in her tone made it clear we weren't just talking about massage therapy anymore. When's your next opening? I fumbled for my appointment book, trying to look professional while my heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Thursday at 2, perfect. She was already pulling out her phone. Number? I gave it to her, watched her fingers fly across the screen. A moment later, my phone buzzed with a text. Looking forward to Thursday. After she left, I stood in the middle of my studio for a full 5 minutes, staring at that text message and trying to figure out what had just happened to me. I'd given my number to attractive clients before. It was just business, after all. But this felt different. This felt like standing at the edge of a very high cliff with no idea how far the drop was. Thursday couldn't come fast enough. When she arrived for her appointment, she was wearing loose athletic pants and a sports bra, her hair down for the first time. It fell in waves past her shoulders, and I had to resist the urge to run my fingers through it. First time? I asked, leading her to the massage room. With professional massage, yeah, she said, and there was something in her voice that made me look at her twice. I usually just work the knots out myself. I explained the process, kept everything clinical and professional. But the moment my hands touched her shoulders, I knew I was in trouble. Her skin was warm and soft, scattered with freckles I wanted to map with my fingertips. The muscles beneath were tight with tension, and as I worked to release the knots, she made small sounds of relief that went straight to my core. God, that's good, she murmured into the headrest, and I had to bite my lip to keep myself focused. I'd done thousands of massages over the years, but this one felt different. Every touch was charged, every movement deliberate. When my hands slid down her back, I felt her shiver. When I worked on the tight spots between her shoulder blades, she arched slightly into my touch. You do this to all your clients? She asked softly, voice muffled by the headrest. Do what? I asked, though. I knew exactly what she meant. Make them feel like they're melting? I should have deflected, made a joke, kept things professional. Instead, I found myself leaning closer, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Only the ones who hang off cliff faces for fun. She turned her head then, looking at me over her shoulder, and the heat in her eyes was unmistakable. Addison, she said. Chelsea, I replied, and we were both leaning in when my timer went off, jolting us both back to reality. The session ended with awkward smiles and careful distance, but as she was leaving, Addison turned back. You ever been climbing? Never, I admitted. You should try it. I could teach you, if you want. I should have said no. Should have thanked her politely and maintained my professional boundaries. Instead, I heard myself saying, when? Saturday? There's a great spot about an hour outside town. Easy routes for beginners. And that's how I found myself 2 days later, strapped into a harness that felt like it was designed to cut off all circulation below my waist, staring up at what appeared to be a completely vertical wall of rock. You sure about this? I called. Up to Addison, who was already halfway up the face, moving with the fluid grace of someone who'd been doing this for years. Trust me, she called back, and something about the way she said it made me believe her. The first few moves were terrifying. Every instinct I had screamed at me to get back on solid ground, to go home to my safe, predictable life. But Addison's voice guided me up, patient and encouraging, and gradually I began to understand why she loved this. There was something purer about it, just you, the rock, and the next handhold. Everything else fell away. When I finally made it to the top, My legs were shaking and my palms were raw, but I felt more alive than I had in years. Addison was grinning at me like I just climbed Everest. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Terrified," I said honestly. "And amazing." "Yeah," she said softly, stepping closer. "That's climbing." We rappelled down together, her body pressed against my back as she guided the ropes, her breath warm on my neck. By the time we reached the ground, my heart was racing for reasons that had nothing to do with the height. "Drink?" she asked, producing a flask from her pack. I didn't usually drink whiskey, especially not straight from a flask in the middle of nowhere, but something about the day had me feeling bold. The liquor burned going down, but it warmed me from the inside out. "So what's your story, Chelsea?" Addison asked, settling beside me on a flat boulder. "Always lived in Boulder, always been into the massage thing." I told her about growing up in Ohio, about getting my certification and moving west for the mountains and the adventure I never quite managed to find. About my quiet life, my comfortable routines, my complete lack of anything resembling risk-taking. "Behavior. Until today," she pointed out. "Until today," I agreed, taking another sip from the flask. "What about you, born climber?" She laughed, but it had an edge to it. "Hardly. Started climbing about 2 years ago after my life basically exploded." "Exploded how?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the valley below us. "Got divorced. Lost most of my friends in the process. Needed something that was just mine, you know?" "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. But I was also relieved to know she was single. Don't be. Best thing that ever happened to me. She turned to look at me, her eyes bright in the fading light. "I'm happier now than I've been in years." The sun was setting, painting the rocks around us in shades of gold and red. Addison was close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes, could smell the faint scent of her shampoo mixed with chalk and sunshine. "Chelsea," she said softly. "Yeah?" "I'm going to kiss you now. Unless you tell me not to." I should have told her not to. Should have remembered all the reasons why getting involved with someone I barely knew was a terrible idea. Instead, I leaned closer and whispered, "Don't you dare stop." Her lips were soft and warm, tasting faintly of whiskey and something uniquely her. The kiss started gentle, exploratory, but quickly deepened as my hands found their way to her hair, and hers settled on my waist. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. "Wow," I breathed. "Yeah," she agreed, resting her forehead against mine. "Wow." We made it back to my place somehow, though I couldn't have told you how. I was operating on pure instinct, every nerve ending alive and singing. The moment my front door closed behind, Eunice Addison's hands were in my hair and mine were tugging at her shirt. "Are you sure about this?" she asked against my mouth, even as her fingers found the hem of my tank top. "I've never been sure about anything in my life," I said, pulling back to look at her, "but I'm sure about this." We barely made it to the bedroom. Clothes disappeared in a trail from the living room to the bed, and when Addison's skin finally pressed against mine, I understood for the first time what all those love songs were talking about. Her touch was reverent and demanding all at once, her mouth mapping every sensitive spot I didn't even know I had. "You're beautiful," she whispered against my collarbone, and I felt beautiful under her gaze, under her hands. Afterward, we lay tangled in my sheets, my head on her chest, listening to her heartbeat slow back to normal. Her fingers traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder, and I felt more content than I had in years. "Stay," I said quietly, not ready for the spell to be broken. "Okay," she said, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. "I'll stay." I woke up the next morning to an empty bed and the sound of Addison's voice from the living room. At first, I thought she might be on a work call. It was early, but not impossibly so. But as I became more awake, her tone registered as hushed and urgent, like she was trying not to be overheard. I told you, Emma. She was saying, Mommy will be home Sunday. Mommy. The word hit me like a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake, my heart hammering for all the wrong reasons. Mommy. She had a child. And if she was someone's mommy, that meant, I know, baby, Addison continued, her voice soft now. The tone people use with small children. I miss you too. Just 2 more days, okay? Then we'll go to the park like I promised. I was out of bed and pulling on clothes before I'd even fully processed what I was hearing. My hands were shaking as I tugged on jeans and a sweatshirt, my mind racing through the implications. If she had a child, she'd probably had a husband. A family. A whole life I knew nothing about. I'd slept with a married woman. By the time I made it to the living room, Addison was off the phone, but I could see the guilt written all over her face the moment she saw me. Chels, she started, reaching for me. It's not what you think. You're married, I said, taking a step back. It wasn't a question. Separated, she said quickly. For over a year now. The divorce is almost final, I swear. You have a child. Her face softened. Emma, she's 4. She's with her dad this week. Her dad, your husband. My ex-husband? Addison corrected, but I was already shaking my head. You should go, I said, wrapping my arms around myself. Please just go. Chelsea, let me explain. There's nothing to explain, I said, even though there obviously was. You lied to me. I didn't lie. I just ... I didn't know how to tell you. By not wearing your wedding ring. The words came out harder than I intended, but I was hurt and confused and feeling incredibly stupid. Addison looked down at her left hand, and I saw her fingers twist around her ring finger where a band had obviously lived for years. I took it off when we separated. I'm not married anymore, Chelsea. Not in any way that matters. Except legally. And you have a child with him. Yes, she said quietly. I do. The silence stretched between us, filled with everything we weren't saying. I wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that whatever was happening between us was real and honest and good. But I'd been the other woman before, unknowingly, and I'd sworn I'd never put myself in that position again. I need you to leave, I said finally. Please. Addison looked like she wanted to argue, but something in my face must have stopped her. She gathered her things quietly, and at the door, she turned back. For what it's worth, she said, last night was the most real I've felt in 2 years. Then she was gone, and I was alone with the scent of her shampoo on my pillows and the taste of regret in my mouth. I spent the next week throwing myself into work, booking back-to-back appointments, and staying late to reorganize supplies that didn't need reorganizing. I ignored Addison's texts, deleted her voicemails without listening to them, and tried to convince myself that what had happened between us was just a mistake. But at night, alone in my bed, I couldn't stop thinking about the way she'd looked at me, the gentle reverence in her touch, the sound of her laugh when I'd made a particularly bad joke during our climb. None of it had felt like a lie. My best. Friend Sarah finally staged an intervention on Friday evening, showing up at the studio with Thai food and a bottle of wine. Okay, she said, settling cross-legged on my massage table with a container of pad thai. Tell me what happened. I'd been holding it in all week, but something about Sarah's patient, non-judgmental presence broke the dam. The whole story came pouring out, the package delivery, the massage, the climbing, the incredible night we'd shared, and then the devastating morning after. So let me get this straight, Sarah said when I finished. She's separated, going through a divorce, has a kid, and didn't tell you up front, right? And you're upset because I stared at her. Because she lied to me. Did she? Or did she just not mention something that she wasn't ready to talk about yet? Sarah, look, I'm not saying she handled it perfectly, but honey, you knew her for exactly 3 days before you slept with her. Were you expecting a full relationship history and disclosure of all dependence? I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it again. Put like that, it did sound a little unreasonable. Besides, Sarah continued, separated means separated. It's not like she's cheating. She has a child, Sarah, a 4-year-old little girl who calls her mommy, and I don't know anything about kids. I don't know if I want kids. I can barely keep my houseplants alive. Sarah set down her chopsticks and looked at me seriously. Is that really what this is about? The kid? Or are you scared because for the first time in your life, you took a real risk and it got complicated? I wanted to argue with her, but the truth was uncomfortable and familiar. I built my entire adult life around avoiding exactly this kind of mess. The uncertainty, the vulnerability, the possibility of getting hurt. What if I can't do it? I asked quietly. What if I'm not cut out for all of this? What if you are? Sarah countered. What if this amazing woman and her daughter could be the best thing that ever happened to you, and you're about to throw it away because it doesn't fit into your neat little plan? That night, I lay in bed staring at my phone, scrolling through Addison's unread messages. The most recent one, sent just that morning, was simple. I miss you. 3 words that made my chest ache with longing and loss. I was still staring at the screen when my doorbell rang. It was past 10 o'clock, and for a moment I considered ignoring it. But something made me get up, pad to the front door in my pajamas, and peer through the peephole. Addison stood on my doorstep, soaked from the rain I hadn't even noticed was falling. She was holding a manila envelope, her hair plastered to her head, looking like she'd been standing out there for a while. I opened the door. I know you don't want to see me, she said before I could speak, but I need you to know the truth. All of it. She held out the envelope with shaking hands. Divorce papers, signed yesterday. I took the envelope, feeling the weight of it. Through the clear plastic window, I could see official-looking documents, signatures, legal stamps. The date, Addison said quietly, watching my face. Look at the date I filed. I scanned the first page until I found it. Filed nearly 2 years ago, 6 months before we'd even met. The separation agreement was dated even earlier. You filed 2 years ago, I said, looking up at her. My marriage was over long before I met you, Chelsea. We just took forever to make it official. She wiped rain from her face with the back of her hand. I should have told you about Emma from the beginning. I was scared you'd run, and I guess I was right. Why didn't you tell me? Because she took a shaky breath. Because every time I mention that I have a daughter, people make assumptions. They see single mom, and they see complications, baggage, someone who comes with strings attached. I wanted you to know me first, just me. I studied her face, seeing the vulnerability there, the fear, the hope she was trying so hard to hide. Tell me about her, I said softly. Tell me about Emma. Addison's face lit up despite the rain, despite everything. She's incredible, smart and funny and completely fearless. She loves dinosaurs and finger painting and climbing trees. She asks about 1,000,000 questions a day and gives the best hugs in the world. Her voice softened. She's the best thing I've ever done. And her father, good guy. We just weren't right for each other. We share custody 50-50 and we're friends. He's actually happy I'm dating again. You told him about me? I told him I met someone who makes me want to be better. Someone who makes me laugh. Someone who's brave enough to try new things even when they're terrified. Standing there in my doorway, looking at this woman who had turned my carefully ordered world upside down in the span of a week, I realized Sarah was right. I was scared, terrified actually. but not of Emma, not really. I was scared of wanting something so much, of caring about someone so deeply that losing them would break me. But maybe that was what love was, jumping off the cliff even when you couldn't see the bottom. I'm not good with kids, I said finally. Neither was I until I had one. I don't know anything about being part of a family. Neither did I. We figured it out as we went. I looked down at the divorce papers in my hands, then back up at Addison, still standing in the rain, waiting for my verdict. Come inside, I said, stepping back. We should probably start from the beginning. The conversation that followed was long and honest and sometimes painful. Addison told me about her marriage, about becoming a mother at 25 and feeling completely overwhelmed, about the slow dissolution of a relationship that had probably never been right to begin with. She told me about the guilt of breaking up her daughter's home, about learning to co-parent with someone she'd grown apart from, about the loneliness of single parenthood. I told her about my own fears, about my history with unavailable people, about the carefully constructed walls I'd built to protect myself from exactly this kind of uncertainty. I can't promise this will be easy, Addison said as dawn began to creep through my windows. Emma is my priority, always. And some days are harder than others. I can't promise I'll be good at it, I admitted. The mom thing, the family thing, I've never even babysat. I can't promise I'll be good at it either, she said with a soft smile. The relationship thing, I mean, it's been a while. We sat there in the growing light, looking at each other across the ruins of our assumptions and the possibility of something real. So what do we do? I asked. We try, she said simply. If you want to, I did want to. Despite everything, despite the complications and the unknowns, and the very real possibility that I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life, I wanted to try. Okay, I said, but I want to meet her, Emma. If we're going to do this, I want to meet your daughter. Addison's smile was brighter than the sunrise. She'd like that. She's been asking about the lady who taught Mommy to climb. You told her about me? I told her Mommy made a new friend who's very special. 2 weeks later, I found myself sitting in a park, watching a whirlwind of energy and dinosaur print leggings race across the playground equipment. Emma was everything Addison had said and more fearless and curious and absolutely luminous with joy. Are you the lady who taught Mommy to climb? She asked, appearing suddenly beside the bench where I was sitting. Actually, your Mommy taught me to climb, I corrected gently. Oh, she considered this seriously. Do you like it, climbing? I do. Do you want to try it someday? Her eyes went wide. Really? Mommy says I'm too little still. Well, there are special kinds of climbing for little people. Maybe we could ask Mommy about trying some easy ones. Emma was off like a shot, racing toward Addison, who was pushing another child on the swings. Mommy, Chelsea says maybe I can try climbing. I watched them together, saw the pure adoration in Emma's eyes, the gentle patience in Addison's response. This was her world, her heart walking around outside her body, and I was asking to be part of it. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, as Emma grabbed my hand and dragged me toward the monkey bars, chattering about dinosaurs and her favorite climbing trees, I felt something settle into place in my chest. Something that felt like home. That was 6 months ago. 6 months of learning that love doesn't always come in the neat, predictable package you expected. 6 months of discovering that 4-year-olds have very strong opinions about everything from breakfast cereals to bedtime stories. 6 months of navigating custody schedules and co-parenting dynamics and the complex dance of building a relationship while honoring the family that already existed. It hasn't been easy. There were nights when Emma cried for her daddy and I felt like an intruder in her grief. There were moments when Addison and I snapped at each other over exhaustion and stress. There were times when I wondered if I was cut out for this, if I was strong enough to love someone else's child as my own. But there were also mornings when Emma crawled into bed between us, chattering about her dreams. There were family climbing sessions where we cheered each other on from below. There were quiet evenings when Addison and I talked through our fears and hopes and plans while Emma played at our feet. And there was the day, just last week, when Emma brought home a drawing from preschool. It was the typical stick figure family, but instead of the usual mom and dad configuration, it showed 3 figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. At the bottom, in her careful preschool handwriting, she'd labeled it, "My family, Mommy and Emma and Chelsea." I cried when I saw it. Happy tears, terrified tears, overwhelmed tears. Addison found me standing in front of the refrigerator where we'd hung it, just staring at those 3 stick figures. "You okay?" she asked, wrapping her arms around me from behind. "I love her," I said, the words surprising me with their intensity. "I love her so much it scares me." "I know," Addison said softly, pressing a kiss to my shoulder. "She loves you too." What if I mess this up? What if I'm not enough? "What if you are?" she said, echoing Sarah's words from months ago. "What if you're exactly what we needed?" Standing there in my kitchen, our kitchen now, filled with Emma's artwork and Addison's climbing gear and the beautiful mess of a life. I never planned I realized something profound. The bravest thing I'd ever done wasn't learning to climb those rock faces. It wasn't even taking that first leap of faith with Addison. The bravest thing I'd ever done was learning to trust the people holding my rope, learning to believe that love, even messy and complicated love, was worth the risk of falling. Because sometimes, if you're very lucky, you don't fall at all. Sometimes you find yourself exactly where you're meant to be, surrounded by people who see all of your fears and imperfections and choose to love you anyway. Sometimes you discover that family isn't just something you're born into, it's something you build. One small choice at a time, one day at a time, one shared adventure at a time. And sometimes, if you're incredibly, impossibly lucky, you find yourself standing in a kitchen covered in finger paintings and climbing medals, listening to the sound of your girlfriend, your partner, your co-parent, your best friend, helping. Your daughter, because she is your daughter now, in every way that matters, tie her shoes for another day of adventures. This is my story. It's not the one I planned, not the neat and tidy narrative I thought I wanted. It's messier and scarier and more beautiful than anything I could have imagined. It's the story of learning that the best climbs aren't always the ones that take you to the highest peaks. Sometimes they're the ones that teach you to trust your gear, to communicate with your partner, to believe in the strength of your own hands and heart. It's the story of discovering that love, real love, isn't about finding someone who fits perfectly into your existing life. It's about finding someone worth changing your life for, someone worth taking risks for, someone worth building something entirely new with. And it's the story of a little girl who draws pictures of stick figure families and believes, with the absolute certainty that only children possess, that love is love is love, no matter how many people it includes or how unconventional its shape. As I write this, Emma is asleep in her room, surrounded by stuffed dinosaurs and the glow-in-the-dark stars we put on our ceiling last month. Addison is beside me on the couch, planning our next climbing trip, a family adventure this time, with kid-friendly routes and plenty of snacks. Tomorrow, we'll wake up and make pancakes and help Emma find her favorite dinosaur shirt and navigate another day of this beautiful, chaotic, imperfect life we've built together. We'll make mistakes and learn from them. We'll have moments of doubt and moments of pure joy. We'll keep climbing together, trusting in the strength of our ropes and the certainty of our love. And someday, when Emma is older, I'll tell her the story of how her mommy delivered a package that changed everything. How sometimes the best adventures begin with the smallest coincidences. How love doesn't always arrive when you expect it or in the form you planned for, but when it does arrive, it's worth every moment of fear, every leap of faith, every risk you take to catch it. I'll tell her that the bravest thing you can do is not to climb the highest mountain or conquer your biggest fear. The bravest thing you can do is open your heart to the possibility of love, especially when that love comes with complications and challenges and no guarantee of a happy ending. Because the truth is, there are no guarantees. Not in climbing, not in love, not in life. All you can do is check your gear, trust your partner, and take the next step up the rock. Face, believing that somehow, some way, you'll find your way to the top. Or maybe you'll discover, as I did, that the view from the middle of the climb surrounded by the people you love, suspended between earth and sky, held safe by ropes you helped tie yourself, is the most beautiful sight of all. This is my story. It's still being written, still being lived, still being climbed one handhold at a time. And I can't wait to see where it takes us next.